opposing vehicles. The video is claimed to be of a Russian tank destroying a Ukrainian tank, and we need to confirm that. First, the tank that is getting destroyed is undoubtedly a T-64BV tank. We can see that because of the placement of the explosive reactive armor on the turret. It perfectly matches the one of the T-64. It also cannot be any T-80 tank because the reverse speed is abysmal, which would mean either a T-72 or a T-64 since they both have 4 km/h reverse speed, and in this case, as I said, it is undoubtedly a T-64BV. Now, the video was published by a Telegram channel of the Russian Marines, and in the video's caption, it is stated that the tanks in question, I say tanks because at the end we can see that there are at least 2 tanks involved on the Russian side, are the tanks of the Pacific Ocean Marines. The tank visually appears to be a T-80 BVM tank. I say that because the turret sides appear to have the ERA boxes. On top of that, the overall shape of the turret seems to be slightly asymmetrical, which is typical for a T-80 BVM. It could be a T-72B3M, but that is unlikely for several reasons. First reason is that the top of the engine compartment seems to be flat, since it is reflecting sunlight. T-72B3 has grills on top of the engine compartment, while T-80 BVM has a bolted plate covering a big portion of the area. On top of that, there also appears to be an exhaust on the hull's rear. T-72 has its exhaust on the side. And the biggest confirmation is that the Russian Marines do not operate with T-72B3 tanks, only T-80 BVM tanks. Also, there is a short part where the tank starts reversing and the reverse speed appears to be too fast to be anything else other than a T-80 tank. First, we can see the Ukrainian tank reversing and observing the area. We can also see a destroyed vehicle nearby. It could have been a BMP or a tank. It is really hard to tell with such quality. Then, a high explosive projectile hits a tree. This is probably Russians attempting to destroy the cover because they most likely cannot get a clear shot at the Ukrainian tank. The Ukrainian tank switches between reversing and going forward constantly, probably changing position trying to spot the enemy. Note that the most Ukrainian T-64 BV tanks do not have thermals, and as such, trying to spot enemies can be really tough, especially in such conditions where they don't have a clear view because of the surrounding foliage. Then we can see the Russian T-80 BVM tank charging in to destroy the Ukrainian tank. They most likely did this because, as I said, they did not have a clear shot on the tank. When they get a clear shot on it, they stop and fire the main gun. The shot appears to have exploded and might seem like a high explosive was used, but that is not very likely. First of all, the explosive reactive armor on the T-64BV would explode, creating the explosion effect. Secondly, the shot from the Russian tank appears to have struck a fuel tank, which would explain the sudden combustion and flames coming out. Therefore, the Russian tank could have either fired a heat projectile or APF-SDS. It is extremely hard to know for certain. Now, would the ERA of the Ukrainian tank have fully affected the shell from the Russian tank? Most likely not. This is most probably a regular T-64BV, which has Contact 1 explosive reactive armor, which only affects regular heat projectiles. Russian tank-fired heat is in many cases tandem-shaped. That means it is only slightly affected by ERA such as Contact 1, and would have still penetrated the tank. And since Contact 1 does not affect kinetic energy projectiles, APF-SDS would have no problem penetrating the tank, since T-64BV is old and its armor array cannot stop most APF-SDS, especially the 3BM42 Mango, which has been seen countless times in Russian tanks during this conflict. Now, why didn't the Ukrainians engage the Russian tank? Well, I believe they haven't even noticed it in the first place. The view from tanks such as T-64 is not great. The gunner cannot see in close range directly to the front. The gunner was probably observing from his main gun sight, which is magnified, and the commander cannot see in close range directly to the front because the commander's sight is located in front of him, and only has one periscope on the front, which is offset to the right. This is a problem because the commander's sight is magnified, and if something is really close, the only way to see it would be to lower the sight, but for that you would need to know that there is something there in the first place. They probably did notice it, but too late. Russian T-80 BVM has thermals, and that probably allowed the crew to keep an eye on the tank while they pushed to get a clear shot. This is another case of the reverse speed proving to be the demise of a tank in this conflict. If the reverse speed of this T-64 was on par with NATO tanks, they could have easily reversed out of there and could have taken a much better position. But with 4 km per hour reverse speed, it was impossible, and it proved to be their downfall. I really found this video intriguing. I believe there aren't many videos where we can clearly see tanks destroying other tanks. It's usually tanks shooting at very distant targets where you can't see what is exactly going on.